Awesome. Well, hey, Blake, thanks a lot for taking the time to talk with me today on the sort of inaugural episode of Soft Skills Are Hard Skills. I really appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Great. Well, this is, like I said, pretty low key. I'd like it to be kind of an organic conversation. I sent you some questions, but I'll probably have some probes that we can dig into. But we'll keep it short to make sure we honor your time. As the topic is called Soft Skills Are Hard Skills, and that's going to be the focus for everybody that I talk to. And you're the first person. So, audience, welcome Blake Cundiff. He is the strategic account manager at NG Impact, and they deliver sustainability solutions and services to global corporations, cities, and governments across the whole world. A little bit more about Blake. Blake and I met several years ago, maybe 5 or more years ago at this point. I was doing some kind of workshop for a group that he was a member of, and he came up afterwards and we hit it off. And so outside of being kind of, work colleagues, Blake and I are definitely friends. We get together at least quarterly to talk shop, but more importantly, talk, philosophy, spirituality, monetary policy, aliens, everything. So we talk about everything under the sun. One thing I don't know if you'll get to, but I hope we do, is he has the nickname No Breaks. And I'm thinking that might apply to some of the things we talk about here today. But Blake, thanks again for your time. Let's dig right in. So explain what you do so that an 8th grader could understand it.
Yeah, so climate change is something that has been a topic for a long time, but never more than it is today. And I think there's a lot of people that disagree with it, whether it's friends and family, or it's governments, or it's countries, or it's organizations. But one thing we can all agree on is that there's a need to reduce our impact on the environment. So I think most people generally, that's the consensus. And so my company helps big Fortune 100 companies develop basically a map that they can follow to reduce their impact on the environment. And then we kind of hold their hand and go with them on that journey, and help them kind of track their progress and really show their work on what they're doing to reduce their impact on the environment around them.
Absolutely. And this topic, whenever you hear climate change, sustainability, then you can get global warming, right? Depending on people's political parties. It's so politicized, but there's cost savings, right? So doing things to offset some of the issues related to climate are good business for the companies that you guys are working with, I assume.
100%. And sometimes it's as simple as being more aware of what you're doing and how you're doing it. Generally that's kind of how it starts. It can get really political, it can get really complex, and it can get really investment intensive. But at the end of the day, there are some very basic things that each individual within that company can do as a part of the way that they operate every day, week, and month, and year over year, that can, kind of move the needle towards making an impact.
Talk a little bit about your specific role over there at NG. What do you do kind of day to day? We got your job title, but what does that mean? What does that look like?
Yeah, so what's interesting about my role is that I work with some of the largest companies in the world, and not many of them. So what they've done is they've empowered me to really intimately get to know a smaller number of really large clients that it's really required to have that level of attention and that much focus on the details of what they're trying to accomplish, where they're at today, so that I can meet them where they're at and really get a good understanding and help diverge a path forward together, Mm-hmm. So I really look at my role as almost like a connective tissue between the two organizations. So really that's what my role is. So it's called strategic accounts, in that there are some companies that are so large and so complex and so nuanced that they require that extra level of coming back to my company and finding ways to creatively, meet their needs and change the way we typically do things that matches more with what they're doing at their scale, to ensure that they're getting a good experience, and most of all, delivering value to the partnership as an individual and as a company.
I like that. And a lot of listeners, if they have sales backgrounds, obviously, or account management backgrounds, this will be very basic for them. But as somebody that works with many organizations across darn near every industry, I find a lot of people don't really understand how a sales pipeline works. And they just think, oh, Blake's in account management, he's in sales. And and they think internal sales, external sales, oh, it's all the same. Oh, business development, it's all one thing. Like, so how would you sort of think about the different phases or parts of like a sales cycle and the different roles and how you fit into that cycle?
Yeah, I love that question because I sales is not what it used to be. It's not Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross. It's not the Boiler Room, although those are great classic movies. That's long gone. People can see through that stuff, you know. So when you think about that traditional like pipeline building and
Mhm.
deal origination and a lot of these like I mean, there's a lot of sales gurus out there pushing a lot of this kind of philosophical sales content, and some of it's good, you know, but I think each individual really has to make it what it is, right? There's got to be a framework there that your company requires and whatnot, but ultimately it's kind of like you have to be a little bit artistic within that framework to be yourself if you really want to have good results. And so when I think about sales, it's less about pipeline and hitting the number and I've got to get this many deals done and make this many calls before that day. Sure, some jobs require those types of activities and measure them as KPIs, but I've never felt like sales is the numbers game that a lot of people describe it as. I've always felt like whether you have strategic clients like mine or just prospecting a normal size company that you're trying to sell into, if you just focus on delivering value in every conversation and creating that two-way communication path to where they're comfortable just talking to you about some of the challenges that they have, whether it's related to something you can solve or not, or they can talk to you about where their priorities are going to be shifting as they head into 2024 without you having to make them feel like they're in this like script of discovery questions and whatnot. So, you know, that's kind of the way that I like to think about it. And so that is something that is probably one of the key topics here with the soft skills and the hard skills. I mean, that would be the soft skill that I think I focus on the most, is just taking the word sales out of it and calling it just delivering value, like just focusing on delivering value to that individual and that person's priorities within the larger company. And then what you see is opportunities and pipeline and all those kind of buzzwords, they start to kind of just show up, and then you can follow the framework to nurture it through the process that you have to do to forecast and do the things you're being asked to do at work.
I like that. So let me paraphrase a couple things I've heard and tell me where I'm wrong. You said for you, it's important to have a framework. You use that word several times. I'd call that kind of the science approach of sales. Like, what's our process? What's our philosophy? What's our scientific method, so to speak? But you said the best people actually treat it more like an art, to where they can take that framework and make it what it needs to be for the person they're having a conversation with.
It's the art within the science, right?
Perfect. Perfect. And it really, I've recently finished rereading Ray Kroc's autobiography, the founder of McDonald's. They said Ray Kroc did three things really well: sold hamburgers, told stories, and made money. And so he was in sales before he started selling McDonald's franchises, and how he sold was totally customer focused. Everything was about value. So he was selling like Dixie cups for many years and then switched to selling milkshake mixers. And he said, even if they can't use my product, if I can connect them with somebody I know that helps them make money in their business, that adds value, your words, he's like, eventually a sale will turn up for me, or a meeting that they'll introduce me to somebody. And just hearing you say that, Ray Kroc was doing the same thing in the 50s. So I like that hasn't changed. And the fact that you said, I prefer, as my philosophy is to take the word sales out of the conversation, that's really interesting.
I like to reverse engineer it. Deliver value, be present with that person, care, be authentic. You know, if you can do those things, it disarms that traditional sales stigma. And everybody is at at the conversation table, they're just relaxed. They don't get the sense that you're desperate to hit a number. You're not pushing something just because your boss told you that that's the number you got to hit. I prefer to work backwards from that, and typically ends up in the spot that you want to be in from the science part.
Absolutely. Full disclosure, you can do a little self-promotion here, right? Because my goal with the soft skills or hard skills, I'm only going to talk to folks that I think are true subject matter experts, that are interesting people, and that are people in my network. I want to give them the spotlight a little bit. So, like, what makes you good at your job?
I appreciate it. I think I touched on a few of those things. Being authentic, people pay attention more when you can tell when someone's being disingenuous. That's another part of the science that doesn't factor in the art, which is the internal sales, right? Like the internal stakeholders that you have to navigate through between different parts of the organizational chart that deliver the services, or play a part downstream from the products that you're bringing forward to your clients. And so that whole awareness, if you can be artistic and spending the time to actually develop internal relationships and partnerships in that same kind of tactic, then you'll see them want to step up and help you and get more creative and work together with you than most people will. So I think being authentic and investing the time internally will set you up for success whenever you're bringing forward things to your clients or your partners.
That's interesting because, again, for the audience, Blake works with very large organizations, lots of different business functions, lots of siloed folks, people that might not even know each other or know that they could have a value overlap opportunity, or perhaps approach budgeting interestingly. So if you can make it easier to create organizational buy-in across different business functions, I bet the folks you're working with really appreciate that.
Sure, and just preconditioning them that there's going to be certain asks that they don't. It's not this service off the shelf. It's going to be nuanced, right? It's going to be some complexities. So I just want to make you aware of that. And it's not me making these things complicated. I'm helping translate so that we're delivering value back and forth. And if you can say that and mean that and live that, then I think people will see it and they want to come forward and help you. Zach, I think one other thing too that as I was thinking through our conversation today, being present in these discussions, like we talk about delivering value with each interaction that you have. Like right now, I've got 3 screens in front of me, right? It's pretty safe to say in a lot of these meetings or larger meetings, even if you think you're in one-on-one, somebody's got a monitor over here and they're kind of glancing at that IM, or there's so many distractions that are happening that being able to shut that off and actually get yourself in the right mindset to be present makes everything a lot easier. In person, it's different, right? Because you're sitting across from each other, but it's something that I work at least once a day, every single morning. I literally get myself into the mindset to say, be there with that person and genuinely be there and care about what they're saying and why they're saying it, and think about the bigger problem about what they're communicating to you. Is there something else that they just haven't realized yet? And you can't get there if you're constantly seeing an IM here and you got the next meeting reminder for 15 minutes, coming up. Just being present sets me up for success at my job, whether it's internally or externally with clients.
Which is sort of parlays right into my next question: is what's the role of communication in your job? You've already talked about being present to read into not just what people are saying, how they're saying it, what they're not saying. And it's really tough to be an active participant in that context if we're being stretched in a lot of different directions. And so it sounds like you go into that very consciously of, I'm here for you, which allows you to pick up on both the meanings they're communicating and maybe the meanings that are in between that you can infer.
You got it. And I mentioned earlier too, the kind of preconditioning thing. Communication is key. And I think that, especially in business, whether again internally or externally, it's not always going to be great. There's going to be issues with the way you're delivering service, and probably not even you.
Right.
You're just caught in the discussion when it's not great. And then, internally there's going to be conflict and things that happen. But if you've spent the time being present, spent the time being authentic, cultivating those relationships, everybody's aware that those situations are going to arise. I think if you're able to either precondition that you see that this is potentially going to be a conflict in the future, like it looks like this is becoming a potential roadblock in the next couple of weeks. What do you think? Do you see it that way? How are you seeing that? And just being able to call it out, even if it's like our company's fault. I'm seeing this as a potential problem in the next couple of weeks. How are you seeing that? Let's get a shared point of view on this, so that if and when it continues to progress, we're on the same side and we're working together to either get around it or bring in other people to remove it. When I think about that, it also means extreme ownership. The direct reference to Jocko's book.
Jocko, yep.
I mean, geez, just get you fired up just hearing that guy anytime. But that book really changed the way that I parent, the way that I'm at work, the way I'm at in the community. Just again, in that example, when things aren't great, that's the time when you've got to just, even if it's the first time you heard of the problem, you're 6 levels removed from it, it's not even on your radar, just saying, hey, Zach, that's my fault. Mm-hmm. Somewhere I might have missed that was coming. That's my fault. Just take ownership right away. And everybody puts the extra stuff down. And then you're there on the same team again, and you're problem solving. And it's not a conflict anymore. You've turned that corner immediately. So I think taking ownership and communication is key. At least it's really served me well.
And I assume that that's part of your sales philosophy, is owning, especially when there's a lack of clarity, a lack of certainty, or a mistake or problem emerges. It sounds like you're like, hey, right here, this guy or our company, we'll own this.
You have to, and because again, being able to see through things. People can tell when you're dancing and you're skirting around an issue, whether you're aware of it or you're caught off guard by it or not. Just smile and say, I missed that. That's on me.
Fantastic. So how do you view, kind of succinctly, because you've been talking about it the whole time, what's the role of sales and communication? Are they the same for you? Are they different? Is one a tool for the other? Like, how does that work?
I don't see how you could ever have them apart. I think it's just, if you're really focused on delivering value in each conversation, even if it's not even a sales conversation, it's an operational check-in, it's a touch base, it's a new introduction. If you're not focused on how am I going to jam something that we sell on this person, I don't see how they could ever be apart. Not directly related to that question, but another way of thinking about it is like, you want to take the guesswork out of it. Most people think of sales and they're like, well, the communication is fine. I go high, they go low, we meet in the middle, and we move on to the next opportunity in the pipeline. That's that kind of old school way of thinking. And I think if you can take the guesswork out of it and put in the work to communicate in advance that says, hey, Zach, I could hand you a menu of the 2,000 menu items like eating at the Cheesecake Factory. I can hand that to you and I can throw stuff at you and see if it sticks. Obviously, wouldn't say that directly, but that's a way of thinking, I think, in that traditional way of thinking about sales and communication. I think of it as, if you can upfront say, I won't ever throw stuff at you and just hope that it's going to be a fit. I'm going to take things that we're seeing in the market. I'm going to compare it to your business, to other clients and the challenges they're facing and what we're doing to help them. I'm going to challenge those. I'm going to vet those, and I'm going to bring those to you and say, this is pretty important. I think this is significant enough that it could make an impact to help you out with the priorities you shared. It's going to move the needle for that initiative that the company's got you working on. I think it makes sense to have a conversation about this and decide together if it makes sense to keep talking about that. When you think about that type of communication, that's where you start to work backwards into the sales and the numbers and the growth.
I love it because you've got so many things that give me a warm, fuzzy feeling, like being direct, being accountable, getting people on the same page, not necessarily having agreement, but having alignment in the same direction. And some of that can be uncomfortable, but the way you just described it and how your process is, as long as you keep it all about the client or the person you're talking to, their needs, their troubles, their priorities, their initiatives, what we're seeing in the market that looks similar, and then arranging that dialogue in a very clear way, I don't see how somebody wouldn't appreciate that approach.
That's a great summary of it, Zach. And I think to your point, like if you keep that at the center, the client at the center, there's no way you can go wrong on that. Because even if they say that's fantastic, not a fit for us.
And if you don't keep beating that project down their throat, you've honored their time, right? And your time as a sales professional or as an account management professional is like, hey, here was an opportunity. I presented, didn't fit. Cool. On to the next thing that they need that will help them.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, we're kind of at the end. The last thing we're gonna do is I want each person to sort of leave the audience with what I call kind of an action opportunity regarding your subject matter expertise. So, like, in other words, what's something that relates to, account management or sales or your authentic approach to communication that you think could stimulate some action in the audience, even if they're not in the sales field, so to speak?
Yeah, I think the big challenge that I would say that, like, you've seen the movie Men in Black, they put the pen up and they forget
Yeah.
everything. And if you've been in sales or account management or what I'm talking about, I don't even feel is really married to sales necessarily.
Hmm.
These are some of the soft skills, right? That you've got to stick to whether you're in sales or not. And so if you can just forget what you were taught, or you've had 4 different companies teach you 4 different sales frameworks, and it starts to kind of get polluted in your mind, forget it. Understand that there's a framework and that there's things that you've got to do, but put the client or the other person internally that you're working with at the center of what you're doing, and think about the fact that that person's there for a job. That person's got their personal life. They're doing their best. Just be present with them. And like I said, I actually work at that. I was blessed to inherit some of that. I was blessed enough to observe my dad for most of my life. The way he interacted in and out of work was consistent. Friends, family, work. He was the same kind of present. That was like a superpower for him, And I don't think that I inherited the superpower version, but I work at it, because when at the end of the day, and this may be a little bit cheesy, so forgive me in advance, but
Cheese away.
I really mean it. If you sit down with someone and you've got them at the center of everything you're doing, you're present with that person, and they can feel that and they can see that and they recognize that, even if they don't say it, it makes them feel good. And if you make somebody feel good after a conversation, whether you got to the next stage of the sales process or you had a good introductory call just to get to know that person and their priorities, if you made them feel that good and they walk away from that, that makes you feel good, because you can see that they're feeling better about themselves and the interaction. Right. And then it just kind of creates this momentum to where, whether you are off to the next person in their organization, if they're talking, they're becoming these like allies. And over a long enough period of time, those allies are bumping into each other, and you're just continuing to have this ripple effect of delivering value to those people, to that company. And again, that's where you start to see, some of that more meaningful engagements happen. It all starts with that one focus on eliminating the distractions and being right there in that moment.
One quote and then a summary of what you just said. I forget if it was Mother Teresa or Maya Angelou, or perhaps both, paraphrasing, people forget what you say to them. They forget what you do for them. They don't forget how you make them feel. And that really seems to be what you're saying. And the way you do that is to challenge the audience, even specifically people in sales, forget what you've learned in terms of sales philosophy, sales process, sales approach, especially if you've been taught multiple methods. Instead, think about the universal principles that cut across those frameworks. Give people the benefit of the doubt that you're working with. They've got other things going on in their day, and you can do that best by keeping them at the center of the discussion and being authentic. rather than having, I've got to get through my 32 discovery questions, then hit investigative questions, and then end with a hard ABC close. Putting that person in the middle is the best way to succeed.
Nailed it.
Fantastic. Well, that was all I had for you. I want to make sure I honor your time here. Any last thoughts or for the audience or for me?
Yeah, no breaks. You called it earlier. It didn't come up until the
Yeah,
end.
explain it.
No breaks. Just all gas pedal. Just don't waste any time. Time is short. Life is short. Make it meaningful, and all gas pedal.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Again, Blake Cundiff, thank you very much for your time and for being the first on the soft skills are hard skills episode. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I'm honored. Thanks.